National security concerns are rife in Canberra this morning over a Russian bid to establish a military base in Indonesia. Moscow has reportedly requested Jakarta to station aircraft in the Papua province, just 1,300 kilometres from Darwin. But when our Defence Minister Richard Marles spoke to his Indonesian counterpart, he was told that reports of Russian aircraft operating in the country are not true. For their take, let's bring in Shadow Finance Minister Jane Hume and journalist Joe Hildebrand. Good morning to both of you. Jane, so Indonesia's saying this is not true, they won't be allowed to. What should we believe?
Yeah, this is really concerning. Obviously, there are national security implications here, and that's why the Coalition has written to the Defence Minister and the Minister for Home Affairs and asked for a briefing. We also want to understand exactly what it is that the Albanese government knew and when they knew it. This obviously only came to light yesterday. Was it a shock to them, or was it something that they knew was coming?
Well, are you saying that they were blindsided by this, Jane?
It does appear that way, but we want to understand that. That's why we've asked for a briefing.
OK, we've got Penny Wong on in just a few minutes, so we'll obviously ask her that. I'm sure she will know. Joe, is this a concern, or is this something that would normally happen? Requests would be made, requests would be refused?
Yeah, look, I don't think the connection between Russia and Indonesia is something that we would welcome on our doorstep. It's obviously deeply concerning. Prabowo, who just got elected as the new Indonesian Prime Minister, is a sort of strongman figure, very much in the mould of Vladimir Putin, and there are reports that the two men have been getting cosy. Australia and Indonesia actually have pretty strong and long-standing defence ties, so we don't hear about it that much, but ever since the 1990s, and this of course got the former Labor government in hot water because they turned a sort of blind eye to East Timor while they were building these defence ties and having both our armed forces do training exercises with each other and sign treaties with each other. So I think Indonesia would respect Australia's very, very, very strong desire not to have Vladimir Putin's forces on our doorstep, and I would be surprised if they went ahead with this.
We don't want to see Russia from our house.
We do not want to see Russia from our house, Sarah Palin didn't say.
Yep. Moving on, new polling has found that voters side with Labor's new housing and tax relief policies over the Coalition's. Resolve strategic results show that when asked whether voters preferred Labor's tax plan or the Coalition's, 40% went with Labor's pitch, 34% backed the Coalition's. There was an even bigger divide when comparing both major parties' housing pitches, 40% backing Labor's, just 27% preferring the Coalition's, while a third of voters are unsure. Jane, are you worried about this?
We're out there every day, Nat, talking to voters, directly to them, and on shows like yours about our comprehensive plan for home ownership and our plan to address the cost of living and restore the economy back to its former self. We want to make sure that young Australians can achieve the dream of home ownership. This government has failed home owners dismally over the last 3 years. In fact, on every metric they've failed. On new home builds, on new home approvals, on new home starts, they've all gone backwards under Labor. They've spent $10 billion on their signature housing policy, which has built 0 homes. They're now asking for another $10 billion to build 100,000 homes. They haven't. With that signature housing policy, 0 homes have been built. 0. And now they're asking for another $10 billion to build 100,000 homes. Now that means $100,000 each. You cannot build a granny flat for $100,000. So this new policy is a fantasy.
Okay, Jane.
We have said that we will come to the next election with a comprehensive plan to increase supply, reduce net migration, to make sure that we incentivise new home owners, clean up the industry and get young Australians into their first home sooner. OK,
what is wrong with your message, though? Because all the polls have you way behind and falling. So are the polls wrong, or is your message wrong?
We want to make sure that we're delivering the message every single day that the Coalition has a comprehensive plan to get people into their first homes sooner.
So are you frustrated that it's not cutting through?
Well, it would help if I get a chance to explain it. If we address supply, reduce net migration to take pressure off supply, if we make sure that we incentivise young homeowners by things like allowing them to access their superannuation for a deposit or having tax deductibility of interest repayments for the first 5 years of a new home build, making sure that we clean up the CFMEU, deregister that militant union that has pushed up the cost of building prices, pause building codes and bring in new apprentices so that we can give confidence to our construction industry, increase supply and incentivise new homeowners.
Joe, we have politicians on this program every day or two. Why do you think the polls are supporting Labor more at this stage? Or are the polls wrong?
No, I don't think the polls are wrong, and my information is that the private polling for the Labor Party shows that they're in an even stronger position because there doesn't seem to be. We have a sort of focus group, a tracking poll that Redbridge has done for News Corp that we release every Saturday called the Voter Verdict, and it shows, and I talk to them, it shows that they're marking down both parties, but that the coalition is just not seen as having much credibility. There's not much meat on the bone. And so while they are frustrated with the last 3 years and don't feel like they've done particularly well, they think that Labor's policy just seems more fleshed out, has more credibility, and that's why that voters aren't falling for these sort of
How can it be credible? They haven't built a house, Joe.
So,
yeah, well, they're building it. Houses take time to build.
$100,000 new houses. You
Houses
cannot build
take
a
time to
granny
build.
flat for. You cannot build a granny flat for $100,000.
Yeah, I know,
This
but
is
they don't like the
crazy.
cash. They don't like the cash sugar hits either, Jane. They see it as a gimmick. Same with the fuel stuff. Same
What,
with the
70 cents a day in 15 months' time is compelling.
yeah, but it's 70
Wow.
cents a day for the rest of their lives, unless the coalition repeals the tax cut, which was a terrible idea.
but it's interesting, Jane,
it's
isn't it?
just
Because you're
crazy.
frustrated and you can't see why people aren't buying it, according to the polls. But then, if they're not buying it, there must be a reason.
Well, when I'm out there every single day, I'm talking to people about 50% off the fuel, like a fuel tax cut, and that is what is cutting through
Yeah.
more than anything else right now. People understand that they're going to get $14 off every time they fill up at the petrol bowser immediately, the moment a coalition government comes to power. Now, that is something that is actually going to address the cost of living for thousands and thousands of Australian households and businesses. It will drive down the cost of groceries. It'll drive down the cost of doing business if you have to drive around as part of your business.
Yeah.
But then
So
in a
this
year
is
it goes
compelling
back
policy.
up, Jane, and people know that. That's the problem.
And at that point
It's
in
a
time,
one-off
there'll
sugar
be
hit.
up to $1,200 cash back of their own money, their own tax back.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Just
and in the
once,
meantime,
though.
over that period of 12 months, we're going to get the energy situation under control, bring down energy prices, get the economy back on track.
And then put people's
That's the
taxes
plan.
up.
Okay, look, I think everyone's had their say. I think, Jane, you've had a good go this morning. But thank you very much for your discussion. We'll see you next week.